Thank you, Commissioner F. That was very enlightening. May I now request Nix and Niichel to please join us in front so we can have our open forum. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying. Let's have our open forum. Again, because we had very interesting discussions. Instead of the original 40-minute allotment, maybe what I'd like to do is allot to 20 minutes. That way we're out by 5. So we have a good Q&A, and then we'll still have the awarding of the tokens, and we'll have the final remarks from
the SEC Commissioner. Recently, you renewed the cease and desist order against Black Cell Technology. The whole topic of security tokens is a little bit missing for me, because payment and technology in payments is clear, but let's talk about security tokens. What is now the position on it? And as far as I can see, my crops is still online. You did not stop it.
Electronic representations of investments in companies are securities and governed by securities laws. So if you were to issue, and we are actually prepared to accept applications, if you wanted to issue an electronic version of a bond or an electronic representation of equity, that's something we would be willing to look at. But if you're going to offer an investment to Filipinos where they participate in a venture, so these are all legal terms, but in essence, if you're offering an investment and an interest in an economic interest in a company and you haven't registered with us, then you violated the Securities Regulation Code and we will prosecute. And we're in the midst of doing that now with a certain entity.
So what's the strategy? Because it's very simple to set up a company in Hong Kong, bridging Virgin Islands or wherever, and you just offer the securities then globally. How are you going to handle these cases? Because I'm sure it will become more and more often to happen if people be successful with this kind of avoiding any kind of regulations.
Okay, so there's actually cooperation among securities regulators. And if, again, the position of the SEC is that if you are offering investments to Filipinos or residents of the Philippines and you haven't registered, you violated the Securities Regulation Code. And you might have done this through an entity that is offshore, but that's really why we have organizations such as IOSCO, in order to be able to cooperate with other regulators abroad and to prevent this kind of abuse through offshore entities.
What's now the status with the discussion in IOSCO? Is there already some kind of regulation? How you cooperating?
Yeah, again, not specifically with respect to, I don't know what to call it, security tokens. Not specifically with respect to security tokens, but again, from our point of view and the point of view of the other securities regulators, I just had a recent conversation with a counterpart from the Monetary Authority of Singapore. Singapore is one of the leaders in enabling fintech. And their position is very simple. If it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, if it acts like a security, it is a security, you need to comply with the law. And there are already agreements in place among securities regulators throughout the world in order to cooperate on things like this.
My second question goes to to technology guys. Where do you see the future of cryptocurrencies? As utility token for payments or in security tokens?
I think DLT has a lot of potential in the traditional assets, not just in virtual currencies. So there's many applications of record keeping everywhere. Land titles, car registrations, voters' ID registrations, etc. So I see blockchain technology as something revolutionary. It might not happen 10 years from now, 20 years from now, but for sure, cryptocurrencies are the first use case, but there will be more.
I think blockchain, once properly applied to many industries, and I emphasize properly applied, can be extremely disruptive. Let me give you a specific example. Let's talk about something like loans. If I wanted to borrow 1 million pesos to buy a car, a bank might lend me that 1 million pesos because it knows that in 5 years' time, it might be able to collect 500,000 pesos in fees and in interest payments from me over that period of time. So that bank will assign an account officer, that bank will have administrative costs to process the transaction. But the 500,000 pesos it makes from me will be enough to cover that cost and then some for the bank to make a profit. If I wanted to break with tokenization or with blockchain, I could break down that 1 million peso loan into 1,000 peso increments. And because of the ledger system of the blockchain, 1,000 unique individuals from around the world could lend me that money. And it will have a perfect store of records. It will have a perfect automated system to administratively process the transaction, such that I am able to find an alternative means for that capital and perhaps only pay out 250,000 pesos in fees instead. Another way to look at it is take a look at securities. If I had a house and I wanted to sell 20% of that house, or if I had a building and I wanted to sell 20% of that building, I will engage with a broker. I will go through this long process to find a buyer, do all of the administrative paperwork, and perhaps in 6 months to a year's time, I'm able to sell 20% of that building. If I am able to tokenize the ownership of that building, I could tap a much larger market and sell 20% of that building within 24 hours, which creates what you call a liquidity premium. The value of the asset, if you are able to create liquidity for that asset, 300 times faster, 100 times faster than before, increases the value of that asset. So the future is really left to the entrepreneurs and the businessmen who are able to leverage off the powers of tokenization and decentralization to create new value for different stakeholders in the ecosystem. So not quite sure how it will evolve, but there are tons of opportunities around it.
Thank you.
Last question.
Alfred, can I give the floor to the others? They might have questions, please. Thank you.
Pahabol lang dun sa comment ni Nix. So just because I'm sitting next to him now and you might say I didn't warn you, if you intend to break up your 1 million peso loan into 1,000 units, for as long as you're offering 20 or more, nakatawa si Francis, more than 20 to Filipinos, you gotta register with the SEC as well. So just take note, that's still but we are open to that situation. And in fact, with respect to crowdfunding, we've already published our draft crowdfunding rules and are now collating the comments that we received. So we are trying to respond to the technology change. Pero yun lang, if you offer to more than 19 in the Philippines, you need to register. So yun lang.
Ida, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. It is good that you're open to this because I believe that blockchain, cryptocurrency possibilities and potential is actually quite limitless. Okay, so my point is because, well, possibly it's limitless, we're open to it, but we're looking at the possible risk. Niichel made a mention of 2 recommendations in terms of limiting the risk. One is having a central market, and the other one is like regulating the wallets, if that's what I'm hearing. So it's kind of like the question is to you and also to SEC. Which is in terms of, and this is actually mentioned as well, is there like a global law that it's that we're making now like similar to UCC? So maybe that's something that can be looked at in terms of having that global law, in terms of handling, because the risk you mentioned the risk that's being experienced to date, and if you're looking at a lot of the news items and the fly-by-night operators, really that's actually necessary. So back to, that's a point, and back to, I think you're nodding no, we don't have, but maybe that's something that can be looked at. Back to Michelle, is that what I'm actually hearing from you in terms of the central market and regulating the wallets? Because that's the way that I was thinking as well.
Right. If we had a centralized exchange that was regulated, Governor Nesting said it earlier, it's a good choke point. And for a new industry like this, it's crucial that we engender trust into the new technology. No one will learn to trust the new technology if they're always going to be concerned about whether they're getting the best prices, whether dealers are ripping them off or not, or whether they'll get the asset that they purchased. So the next logical step is for a centralized exchange. It's the next step for us to foster this ecosystem.
Okay. What about the wallets? Because like when I created my wallet like three years ago, there's no name. It's anonymous. And the anonymity of it is actually one of the extra of the blockchain, that the people would not know that it's your actual funds, but you're saying to actually regulate the wallets as well?
Right. So if you just create a wallet without using it to transfer Bitcoins in or out, it will stay unnamed. But if the exchanges get regulated, those wallets with which you use to transfer Bitcoins onto the exchange, they will now be named. And there are efforts globally. We know of a few organizations who are in the business of putting names into these wallets. And the result would be a global blacklist of wallets that have been used for illicit purposes. And any exchange can access that system and refuse any transactions that are in that database. So it's a great solution for AML.
Just a question for Commissioner Amatong. We were approached by a client who is considering an ICO, and we think it would fall under a security token. We understand that there was an issuance as recent as January 2018, wherein the SEC mentioned that coins VCs are akin to securities and therefore would be processed based on existing regulation. Just wanted to confirm that it will go through that process.
The nature of my appeal. We understand that the technology makes certain things possible so that the process for a security token might be different from the current process for a security. So just one example, although it pains me to say this because I'm sitting next to Ed, one of the top underwriters in the Philippines today. Pero wala magawa, Ed. That's the example that came to mind. So underwriting, a requirement right now is that when you issue securities, especially with a certain amount.
Hi, good afternoon. I have a couple of related questions for Nix and Niichel. Firstly, my understanding is that the blockchain, at least for Bitcoin, it takes 10 minutes for a transaction to be executed or to settle. At the same time, there's also a limitation on the size of the block of data. So in theory, this means that a transaction will take 10 minutes before it's settled. Now, this would make sense for remittances or to transactions that would take days. But for smaller value transactions, such as merchant payments, this may not be very practical. So can you comment on this? Is the understanding correct? And a related question to that, what would make blockchain superior to other electronics payment solution given this limitation? We have Gcash, there's Paymaya. Is it mainly on the security component that makes it superior given these limitations? Thank you.
Being used as a currency in the real world. It's more used as a store of value. It's almost like gold. 10 minutes is the absolute fastest time your transaction will push through. It could take much more than 10 minutes because the miners tend to prefer to process the larger Bitcoin transfers versus the smaller Bitcoin transfers. So not very practical at present as a form of payment, to be very honest. Now, having said that, there are projects where they're called side chains that are being developed to the Bitcoin blockchain. Think of it as batch processing, where the process by which the transactions are validated are offloaded to a separate blockchain and then re-onloaded later on, which could drop, if successful, the processing speed to seconds for Bitcoin. So then maybe once that's fully implemented, that's creates more utility for the Bitcoin platform. What was your second question?
Well, given the blockchain,
Why blockchain over?
Is it more superior than existing solutions?
It's not a question of superiority. It's just different. GCash and PayMaya are both central systems, just like PayPal. If you want to pay something and it's facilitated by GCash, there will be one central entity that will determine whether or not your payment will be allowed. In the case of, or the transfer of money will be allowed. In the case of the blockchain, there is no central authority that makes that decision. There are miners. Anyone can be a miner in this room. There are miners who will independently validate your transaction. And you cannot game that system. The miners cannot game that system either. So it's a much more transparent, open space for people to participate in. On top of course, the centralized system.
Yeah, I guess I can address the part on the payment system. So actually, if I'm a merchant and I want to sell this bottle of water to Ed, I don't have to code it in Bitcoin to be able to use Bitcoin. Let's say this is worth 60 pesos and 60 pesos is worth 1 Bitcoin. When Ed makes a payment to me of 1 Bitcoin, I can execute a simultaneous sell of 1 Bitcoin. I can maintain an inventory of 1 Bitcoin so that as soon as I receive the Bitcoin from Ed, I can already sell it and get 60 pesos. Extending that further, Ed himself doesn't need to hold 1 Bitcoin. The payment system can function such that when Ed executes the payment on his app, it buys a Bitcoin. Were to be used extensively, I imagine that it would be in such a way that volatility is irrelevant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'll do, that ends the Q&A, but I will request our distinguished speakers. I'll start with Mr. Niichel.
I'll go back to my last slide, or second to the last slide. It is 1995 in Web 1.0 all over again. And no one can really imagine what the potential of this technology and this approach can the opportunity be for you. The opportunity there is massive. And I believe that not only should technology companies explore it, but also traditional businesses.
Work together with you, the investing public, the technologists, the entrepreneurs, to come up with a workable framework in the Philippines. There are samples within the region, but we want to do a dialogue with you, and we thank SharePHIL for helping us start that dialogue through this forum. That said, the second thing, because I know a lot of people here are thinking of investing, including Ed, in virtual currencies. So let me just, I believe it's a quote from Warren Buffett, the famous investor: don't invest in something you don't understand. So if you're going to invest in this space, I would suggest, before you spend your hard-earned money, try to understand what you're investing in. Don't just go with the flow. Thank you very much.
I'll echo that last sentiment. Wearing the hat of a investment professional because everyone's selling and you don't have a view. Always know what you're doing. Even if you don't get it right, you're sure to not lose that much. And lastly, I guess this is more about the industry. blockchain technology is something that I personally believe to be very revolutionary. It will change the way we live, the way we transact, and the way we interact with society. But the only regulators, market participants, and collectively, hopefully we can make this a better Philippines through blockchain technology.
Thank you very much. With that, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm round of applause to our three great speakers. May I request our chair and our president to give our tokens to our three speakers, and then Francis will close off with a closing remarks.
The speakers, most especially Amatong, Niichel, and the governor is left. I personally saw him off. And but this forum, I think it's very timely. Would not have been possible without the support of our sponsors. Just to mention them, please, and they deserve. Our gold sponsor, SGB, the very first sponsor. Thank you very much, SGB. Of course, our Dusit Hotel, care of our chairperson. Our staff have worked so hard to make this happen. Well, we at SharePHIL decided to do this because our mantra is investor. I'm glad that we're very able speakers. In fact, I've received text messages while the speakers were doing their own part, saying, and may I quote, very good speakers. They can go down to the level of the ignorance. And I think that says much about them. To Commissioner F, most especially, we have assigned him a topic on the legal risk. But he went more than that. He pointed out policy and regulatory challenges, which was also done by, ably done by Governor Nesting Espinilla. So, thank you very much again, and till the next forum. We have something in store for you, but we're still in the process of finalizing the next topic. Thank you very much, and good afternoon.